Hello and welcome. A dozen years of democracy, but can Nigeria maintain the momentum as voters prepare to go to the polls? Elections were set to start over the weekend, but have been postponed several times due to difficulties in delivering ballot papers to all polling stations. And that's raising questions about whether or not Nigeria will be able to convincingly consolidate its young democracy. The current president, Goodluck Jonathan, remains the frontrunner in the polls, with the added track record of his People's Democratic Party winning every presidential race since 1999. Mr. Jonathan's main contender is the former military leader, Muhammadu Buhari. Around 70 million voters are registered in Africa's most populous nation, where more than 80% of the people live on less than $2 a day, despite its huge oil wealth. So today we ask, how much does Nigeria's credibility as a democracy depend on this election, countering the lingering stereotype of a politically corrupt country? We have two guests on the show, both award-winning writers. In just a few minutes we'll be talking with Nigerian writer Chimamanda Adichie. But first we start with a guest whose name has become synonymous with activism in Nigeria. He is poet and dramatist Wallace Umunna, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. He was also a political prisoner in the late 1960s during Nigeria's civil war. Well, I started by asking him if it was wise for him to launch a new political party in Nigeria at this time.
Well, first of all, it's not really a new party. It's just that it was formally registered last year. It's been a movement after the overthrow of this man, Sani Abacha. A group of people came together and, just try to keep up the momentum. And it's really for youth, the youth who feel disenfranchised, who feel they cannot belong to any of the main parties. It's just a platform for them. It's not a major party or anything like that. It's just to give some avenue for the young generation, that's all.
So it sounds, Professor, more like a party that might have some influence in the bigger mix as opposed to directly vying for power and control.
No, it's not vying at all for power. First of all, it hasn't got any of the resources which the other parties have. No, it's just to get, I like to get the young people, to have them bloody their feet in this mainstream politics, instead of sitting down and grumbling, nobody listens to us. Well, so I just said, there is this structure, why don't you take it over and use it? That's all.
Now, watching what's happening there with the election, are you surprised there's been a delay in the vote? And I'm wondering how you regard the potential for a free and fair election at this stage.
Well, the first thing to remember is that the system has been completely degraded by the former president of Nigeria and his stooge, who was then the chairman of the Electoral Commission. There have been no elections in the past 10 years, and Jega, the new commissioner, chairman of the commission, was not starting from level zero. He was starting from minus. So I am not in the least surprised that he discovered that he had so much debris to clear out before he could even begin a straightforward, normal, believable exercise. So the difficulties, I guess, were already implanted before he got there.
Interesting you raised the issue of the commission. We had an email, if I may put it to you, from a viewer in Nigeria. It came in from Zainab Jato, who wrote in saying, as long as the INEC conducts a transparent and unbiased election, I will support the postponement until it is conducted properly. And I guess there is quite a good point there, isn't it? At least a good idea that there is some effort to try to make this free and fair and try to at least balance it out.
Well, we Nigerians were very impatient people, and some of us have very short memories. Anybody who remembers, who takes into account the corruption, the deliberate, systemic corruption of the commission under that president, whom I shall not name, and the commissioner, you would understand that it'll take a while to fix things properly, no matter how much money you pour into it. When people hear billions being poured into an exercise like this, they think, so everything goes straightforward, bingo. No. There's a lot of rubbish to clear out in terms of personnel, degraded structures, infrastructure, and also the stubbornness of the the powerful political forces. Their stubbornness to continue in the old manner, and they'll do anything to subvert it. Now, I'm not saying I'm not saying I score the commission 100%. No, no, no. I'm just saying that we have to take into consideration the background to this current dispensation.
So then I wonder, Professor, to what degree is this, what does this election represent to Nigerians? Is this really, as some are saying, a litmus test for democracy in the country?
Yes, I would say that. In fact, that is why I've encouraged a number of, as I said earlier, a number of people to try and go in because it's a crucial test. Since we got rid of the military, there has not been one honest election. In fact, there has been no election to speak of. And it's an opportunity after decades of military waste and degradation of the political culture. It's an opportunity really to really demonstrate where the people's will lies. And so it's not a moment to boycott cynically the exercise to say, oh, well, it's just like old times. No, we've got to try and make this one the watershed of Nigerian political intelligence.
That leads me to put an email question to you that came in from a viewer in Kano in Nigeria, where Suleiman Ayoyo writes in, how can ordinary citizens make this crucial election successful?
Well, first of all, by turning out en masse and not just voting, but protecting their votes. I should say, by the way, that the system itself needs to be overhauled. I'm talking about the political system. You cannot have a genuine, really meaningful democracy if you rely on parties which have the monetary means. In other words, we're practicing a democracy which is supposed to encourage national unity. You force political parties to have representations all over the nation. Now, very, very few. There are individuals who can do that. There are individuals who can create political offices all over the station overnight, all over the nation overnight. But if you have a democracy whereby you have political parties which can concentrate on areas of their interest, as you sometimes have in the United States and other places, Green Party, it doesn't attempt to be a national party, but it has certain issues and can concentrate on those issues. Now, when the electoral system is changed, you will have the beginnings of an authentic democracy in which interests are represented no matter how minuscule, no matter how grandiose, not just hand over the whole nation to those who, in many cases, who've stolen the country blind and now use the money to perpetuate themselves. So we're just managing. This is just one step towards what I believe will be the eventual democratic system in Nigeria.
We had a number of emails for you. I'll put another one to you, if I may, Professor. This came in from South Africa, from Akinola Akintoye, who says, what will the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, offer Nigerians if they emerge winners in the elections? And of course, the PDP has been pretty much in power since 1999. I wonder to what degree this is also a litmus test on the presidency of Goodluck Jonathan?
Well, first of all, the PDP has been a bane on the nation, and my personal view is that the governing party has just got to be sidelined for new blood to take over. I do not believe that the PDP has anything more to offer this nation except blood, tears, disappointment, corruption, political killings. I mean, we had more political assassinations under the PDP than any other party in the memory of that nation. And clinging to power by, clawing their way back into power, for me, is not in the interest of Nigerians. So my position is, please, let's just have some new minds at work for Nigerian progress.
Now, I wonder, there's a huge disparity, of course, in Nigerian society, with 80% living on less than $2 a day, when the country has so much oil wealth and mineral wealth. And I wonder, how can that be translated to something that addresses this issue? How can steps be taken to make sure some of that wealth does actually close that disparity gap?
Well, you asked a very, very serious question there. It means actually overturning the present political system. As I said earlier, if I can just give one example. I don't know if you've had time to examine the earnings of the legislatures. I mean, a member of a House of Assembly is earning more than the President of the United States. I mean, when you take the basic salary plus perquisites and allowances and so on, even without the perquisites, you find an assemblyman is earning more than the President of the United States. Now, that is already an index of the disparities between the various earning groups within Nigeria. That goes all the way. Compare these salaries. And even the chairman of Central Bank has let out a cry and said, this system cannot continue. Something is going to implode. So the start for me is even to review the constitution of the nation, the constitution which allows, as you just remarked, 20% to cream off the entire resources of the nation. We don't have to do it the Egyptian way. We don't have to do it the Libyan way. I believe that a genuine constitutional overhaul, which takes the system to pieces and then puts them back again, this is the only salvation I see for avoiding what for me would be an eventual showdown in the nation.
An email from Lagos, if I may, sir. It's from Don Maurizio, who wrote in saying, the Nigerian government has said that the army will provide security during the elections. Is this an attempt to intimidate the opposition?
Oh, I don't know. If the army is brought in, I would like at least to believe that it'll be to reinforce the inadequate forces of the police. And in any case, the police has been so badly corrupted under past government at election time. And sometimes even the Inspector General of Police is suddenly appointed to oversee certain aspects of rigging. I mean, we've seen that in the past. So bringing the army in is, for me, not a bad idea. It's not a good precedent. I would rather it didn't happen. But in many areas, we have photographs of police commissioners carting off ballot boxes. I'm talking about the last election. In my own state, Ogun State, for instance, police coming in, shooting in the air, scaring off the voters, and taking off the ballot boxes, never to be seen again. So what do you do in circumstances like that?
We have another email question that came from Eddie Bayo. And Eddie Bayo wrote in saying, bribery and corruption are menaces to Nigerian society. How can they be tackled at the highest level? And Professor, you touched on this earlier on in the show. Can there really be something done when it's considered almost institutionalized by some people?
Yes. Well, the first thing is to remember that there's corruption everywhere, even in the communist countries, in the advanced societies, democratic societies like the United States. We begin from there. And then we ask ourselves, do these countries still manage to be productive despite corruption? In other words, is corruption secondary to projects, to genuine projects, to development? And then compare that to Nigeria, where I must say that very often corruption seems to be the main business. Now, confronted with that disparity, you need a very strong anti-corruption force, just as we had under the leadership of one young man, Ribadu, some years ago, who's contesting elections, and whom I'm backing, by the way. I think he can represent the wind, the youthful wind of change I'm talking about. So you give it its full powers, as happened under Ribadu, powers to arrest, to prosecute, to investigate, and make it not responsible for a change, not responsible to the president of the nation. In other words, a totally independent commission, virtually with its own police force, its own investigative force, and it's thoroughly teethed with forces of discipline. That will be the beginning. There was a saying when Ribadu was in power that the fear of the EFCC, the organization he headed, was the beginning of wisdom. And believe me, it was. He toppled the all-powerful Inspector General of Police, put a number of governors to flight, had them prosecuted not only in Nigeria, but in other countries like London, enabled Nigeria to recover billions of naira. And this man was saying danger, that assassination attempts were made. He was that effective. Now, if you resume that kind of autonomous and powerful and dedicated organization, believe me, you'd cut corruption in Nigeria by half within a couple of years.
Professor, with just over a minute to go, I wonder where Nigeria stands on the international stage then. It's seen phenomenal growth. It's seen as one of the growing powerhouses of the region, not just within Africa, but even the surrounding countries. Where does this election, where does Nigeria's current situation leave it in terms of being a major player on the international stage?
Well, if we put the old hands back in power, believe me, we're not going anywhere. And that's why I constantly urge the youths who form about 65% of the electorate to take a risk and just to go for change. Forget us, the old brigade. You know, most of us are spent anyway. Many are corrupted, many are locked in their own ways. They should just make a clean break with the past.
That was celebrated Nigerian writer and activist Wallace Umunna, talking to us earlier about the importance of youth participation in the nation's future. One young such Nigerian who says the youth have the power to transform her country's political culture is novelist Chimamanda Adichie, and she's joining us from Boston. Good to have you with us. Now, your works Purple Hibiscus, an award-winning book written in 2005, and Half of a Yellow Sun, published a year later, have explored Nigeria's complex history of colonialism, war, and independence. Our phone lines are now open. You can call in with your questions and comments or send an SMS or an email to us. Chimamanda, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there you heard Wallace Umunna, of course, a very prominent voice in Nigeria and outside. He was appealing heavily to young Nigerians to take much more of an active role in the country's political structure. I mean, what sort of political youth awakening, if any, have you seen in Nigeria?
I think that what I find most encouraging is that young people seem to be more politically aware. They seem to want to participate. I think that in 2007, for example, I think the general idea was that the PDP, the ruling party, would steal the election, so there was no point in voting. But this time, it seems that young people are just really keen to participate. And during the voter registration exercise, it was really incredible how many young people turned up and registered to vote, and how many young people are starting groups on Facebook, for example, how many young people are starting grassroots political movements where they're trying to educate people on how important it is to participate. Right. And yeah, so.
You know, we had a number of emails for you. I'm going to put one to you that came from South Africa, from Johannesburg, where a viewer by the name of Prestige wrote in saying, many current leaders began ruling before some of us were born. They ignore the young population, who in turn leave the country. A revolution will soon take place. Now, do you see any sign of that kind of frustration? Wallace Umunna said, you know, in Nigeria it will happen, but not like in Egypt or Libya or anywhere else. But do you see the kind of frustration among young people that might actually take them to the streets?
I'm not sure about taking to the streets, and I think that there are different ways in which a group of young people can have a voice, and that for me the kind of revolution that makes more sense is a revolution by voting. And so the fact that you have young people who are talking about voting, who are talking about going to the polling stations with their phones to make sure that their votes are counted, for me that's a revolution of sorts, because you know, one doesn't necessarily have to take to the streets to bring about change.
Right. Another email that came in from Nigeria itself, from Kwara State, Salahuddin Abdullah writes in saying, older politicians manipulate young people to become thugs who carry out their political interests. How can Nigeria succeed given the high levels of corruption and poverty? And how vulnerable do you feel young people are to such manipulation?
Well, there are always going to be people who will be manipulated, right? But I think that there are also people who resist that. I think that the very idea of talking about, which is what young people are doing, talking about you know, making sure that votes are counted, talking about people are setting up websites which for people to report incidents during voting, and this is done by young people. And I think that there is also, in addition to knowing that there are people who will be manipulated, there are also people who are very keen to resist that, people who are very keen to counter that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because the viewer, Salahuddin, mentioned the issue of politics being corrupt in Nigeria, and that's a standard stereotype image of Nigeria, sadly, that there is entrenched corruption there. And I wonder if that's the only identity you feel the country has, or is there anything else that's changing that cultural identity of Nigeria nowadays?
Well, Yes, Nigeria has that. But you know, I mean, corruption is everywhere. And I think for me, what's important is what do we do? uh, in other words, there's corruption, but there are other things, and that there's corruption, and there are people who are fighting corruption. I think that Nigeria is also a place of just really vibrant people who increasingly want change. I think that's important. I think Nigerians are very good followers. I think Nigerians are looking for inspirational leadership, and that when they find it, it can bring about change, and corruption will reduce. In many ways, we don't have institutions that work, and because of that, it's very easy to have people in positions of power who are not accountable, to have situations where there's no transparency, nobody's answering to anybody. But I think that that's changing, and so, you know, there's corruption, but then there is also the movement to counter corruption.
It's interesting you say that, of course, you know, with the election, that brings me on to the election, because there's a lot of people saying this is a litmus test for democracy's strength in Nigeria. And I wonder to what degree, you know, the immediate concern, of course, is for a peaceful and efficient election, no violence, there's worry about violence. But to what degree is the issue of policies and what the parties are offering being talked about? How much is the actual content of the election being thoroughly examined by the people of Nigeria?
I think that's also changing. I mean, in general, political campaigns in Nigeria are about having very colorful rallies, and, you know, lots of people sort of in a square, and somebody waving, but in this past election cycle, that actually a few weeks ago, a group of young people came together and organized a political debate, which I moderated. And you had some of the presidential candidates come on to talk about what they will do, to actually answer questions about specific things that young people were concerned about. And that's not happened before. Right. And so the fact that increasingly we have that sort of debate about ideas and about policy and about what will you do when you become president is an encouraging sign.
Is there much talk about how the rich wealth, the mineral wealth of Nigeria, which is evident there, of course, has been siphoned off by a few individuals in the past, how that might be distributed more equally, how there might be more equity for the people of Nigeria and their mineral wealth?
Yes, but I think also that in addition to our mineral wealth, I mean, Nigeria is really not a wealthy country. I mean, there's so many people that I don't know that Nigeria is particularly a wealthy country. I think that there are problems, there are things that need to be looked at about not just how it's distributed, but also how the oil companies work and the kind of collusion they have with the Nigerian government. And those are all the things that I think a president who actually cares about what's happening in the country would do well to examine.
We've got an email from Nigeria, another email from Nigeria, if I can put this to you, from Buraimo Elutunje, who says, youth are aware of their responsibility to elect a credible leader. We no longer vote based on old ethnic and religious sentiments. This election will strengthen the unity of a diverse population. Do you feel that there is the next step being taken?
Yes, very much. I think that I speak for many young people in Nigeria when I say that we really don't care what region that the president comes from. All we want is a president who is credible, who is accountable. And, you know, the idea that you vote for somebody because he's from your hometown is increasingly irrelevant.
You know, your books, actually, which have been award-winning and best-selling books, talk about Nigeria's complex and violent history, and I wonder what lessons have been learned from that past that people could hang on to. A quick thought on what lessons might be learned that might help with the next step with the future.
I think, if anything, this is the hope, of course, that one actually learns anything from reading my work. It's that it's very important not to politicize ethnicity. It's very important not to politicize religion. I think those have been two major reasons that we've had problems in Nigeria. And that it's very easy to stop that. These things are orchestrated. It's quite easy to stop the politicization of religion and ethnicity. And my novel, Half of a Yellow Sun, in some ways is about how, you know, the horrors that can result when you do that.
Well, Chimamanda Adichie, thank you so much for sharing that time with us and talking about your country.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us too with your questions. Remember, you can watch a podcast of the show on iTunes. Today we feature our conversation with the renowned and outspoken American intellectual, Dr. Cornel West, and his take on the leadership of President Barack Obama. On the next show, former U.S. State Department spokesman P.J. Crowley gives us an insider's take on politics in Washington and its role in the Middle East uprisings. Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.